White kids bury black boy alive for being the smartest in class. The ending will shock you. Introduction. Sometimes brilliance becomes a beacon and a target. In a small town where differences are magnified, Jeremiah, a 14-year-old black boy, shines as the top student in his class, defying expectations and boundaries. But his excellence stirs envy and resentment in a group of privileged peers. What begins as jealousy soon escalates into something far darker, a harrowing act meant to break his spirit. What would you do if standing tall meant facing those who tried to bury you? Jeremiah's journey isn't just about survival, it's about triumphing in the face of unimaginable adversity. This is yet another heartfelt and powerful story from Living Narratives, where we bring you tales that challenge your perspective and touch your soul. Share with us where you're watching from in the comments, and join us as we uncover Jeremiah's extraordinary story. Jeremiah adjusted his glasses as he scribbled the final answers to his math assignment. The classroom was nearly empty. Only a few students remained, either engrossed in their work or chatting in small groups. Jeremiah always made use of every moment before the bell rang, a habit he had developed not just because he enjoyed studying, but because he knew that for him, being prepared was a necessity. Being the best student wasn't just a goal, it was his way of fighting back. "You planning to break another record, genius?" The sarcastic voice sliced through the room's quiet. Jeremiah looked up to see Carter standing there with a smirk, flanked by two of his friends, all with their arms crossed as if to assert dominance. Jeremiah ignored the comment and returned his focus to the notebook, trying to remain calm, though he felt the sweat start to gather at the back of his neck. He had learned long ago that responding would only make things worse. Carter stepped closer, shoving Jeremiah's notebook off the desk. "You think you're better than all of us? I bet the teachers only like you because it makes them look woke." Laughter erupted from Carter's friends, echoing through the room. Jeremiah remained still, gripping his pen tightly. He wanted to respond, to shout that his achievements weren't about favoritism, but about the hours of hard work he put into everything. But he knew his words would fall on deaf ears. The bell finally rang, and Jeremiah hurriedly gathered his belongings, avoiding the group still jeering at him. As he stepped out of the classroom, he crossed paths with Mia, who leaned against the wall with a concerned expression. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Jeremiah nodded, forcing a small smile before walking away. He knew Mia cared, but he also knew she couldn't shield him. This was his fight. That night, Jeremiah sat at the kitchen table while his mother, Evelyn, prepared dinner. He told her about the awards ceremony happening at school the next day and how he'd been named the top student again. Evelyn's face lit up with pride, but she noticed the hesitation in her son's voice. "You've earned this, Jeremiah. Don't let anyone take it away from you." He wanted to believe her, but the memory of Carter's hateful glares and mocking laughter lingered in his mind. He knew the next day would bring more than just a certificate and polite applause. He knew his excellence was a provocation to those who refused to accept that he, a black boy, could be the best in the class. As he lay in bed that night, Jeremiah closed his eyes, but his thoughts refused to rest. He envisioned the challenges awaiting him and how he would confront the inevitable clash. There was a deep anger inside him, a desire to scream at the world that he didn't deserve to be punished for being smart, for working hard, for daring to dream of being someone in a place where the odds were stacked against him. But he also knew he had to be strategic. The intelligence that set him apart in the classroom would have to be his weapon outside of it too. The next morning, Jeremiah put on his best shirt and trousers, the same outfit he wore for special occasions. The school auditorium buzzed with chatter as students and parents filled the seats, waiting for the ceremony to begin. When Jeremiah's name was called, he stood up slowly, taking a deep breath before walking to the stage. Each step felt heavier than the last, but he held his head high. Applause filled the auditorium as he accepted the certificate from the principal. Yet, Even amidst the clapping, he could feel the piercing stares. His eyes met Carter's in the crowd, and the disdain on Carter's face was unmistakable. Carter leaned over to whisper something to his friends, who stifled their laughter, but Jeremiah stood firm, gripping the certificate tightly as though it were a shield. When the ceremony ended, Jeremiah stepped off the stage and headed down the hallway. Mia caught up to him. "You were amazing up there," she said with a genuine smile. Jeremiah nodded his thanks, but before he could reply, he noticed something unusual on his desk back in the classroom. A small, folded note sat there, scrawled in large, hasty letters. "You'll regret this." His stomach twisted, but he tucked the note into his pocket without a word. He knew this was just the beginning, and whatever lay ahead would be bigger than any award or recognition. It wasn't just his achievements. On the line, it was his right to exist and excel. The schoolyard buzzed with the typical chaos of the afternoon. The slamming of lockers, snippets of hurried conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter. Jeremiah stood at the edge of it all, clutching his books tightly against his chest. He tried to focus on the positives, the certificate in his bag, the pride in his mother's eyes, but the note from earlier gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. "You'll regret this." The words were simple but carried the weight of a promise, a warning that something darker loomed ahead. Carter and his crew lingered near the cafeteria, their loud voices and arrogant postures making them impossible to ignore. As Jeremiah passed by, one of them stepped into his path, forcing him to stop abruptly. Carter smirked, his arms crossed over his chest, while his friends circled around like vultures. "Hey, genius!" Carter sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "Enjoying your little trophy. Bet you think it means something." Jeremiah took a deep breath, trying to step around him, but another boy blocked his way. "What's the rush? We're just talking." Carter's tone was casual, but the underlying menace was unmistakable. "I don't have time for this," Jeremiah said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He tried to keep moving, but Carter grabbed the strap of his backpack, jerking him back slightly. "Of course you don't," Carter spat, leaning in closer. "You think you're so much better than the rest of us, don't you? Walking around like you own the place just because you got some stupid award. Newsflash, no one wants you here." Jeremiah felt the sting of the words, but refused to let it show. Instead, he locked eyes with Carter, his gaze unwavering. "I earned that award," he said calmly, "and nothing you say will change that." For a moment there was silence, the kind that made the air feel heavier. Then Carter's smirk twisted into something colder. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said, releasing Jeremiah's bag. "But guts won't save you. Watch your back." Jeremiah walked away, his heart pounding in his chest. The threat wasn't just words, it was a promise, one that echoed in his mind long after he had left the school grounds. When he got home, he placed his books on the kitchen table and sat down, staring blankly at the wall. Evelyn noticed immediately. "Jeremiah," she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel as she approached. "What's wrong?" He hesitated, unsure of how much to tell her. Evelyn was his rock, the person who had always encouraged him to reach for greatness, but he didn't want to burden her with his fears. "It's nothing," he said finally, forcing a small smile. "Just tired." Evelyn studied him for a moment, her eyes soft but probing. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "I know," Jeremiah said quietly. He wanted to believe that, but something about Carter's threats felt different this time. This wasn't just about teasing or jealousy. It was about control, about putting him back in a box that he had worked so hard to escape. The next day, as Jeremiah opened his locker, a pile of crumpled papers spilled out. He picked one up and unfolded it, his stomach sinking as he read the words, "Go back to where you belong." Similar messages were scrawled on every sheet, each one more hateful than the last. His hands trembled, but he quickly stuffed the papers back into his locker, refusing to let anyone see his reaction. As the day went on, the whispers and snickers followed him like shadows. In the classroom, Carter and his friends sat at the back, tossing balled-up pieces of paper at his desk. When one hit him square on the shoulder, he turned around, only to see Carter feign innocence, his friends laughing under their breath. Mia noticed everything. After class, she approached Jeremiah as he gathered his things. "You can't let them get to you," she said, her voice firm but kind. "They're just trying to scare you." "It's more than that," Jeremiah admitted, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "They're not going to stop." "Then don't let them win," Mia said. "You're better than them, and they know it. That's why they're so afraid of you." Her words were meant to comfort him, but they also reminded him of the harsh reality he faced. Being better wasn't enough. It had never been enough. He would have to be stronger, smarter, and more resilient than anyone else just to survive. That evening, Jeremiah sat at his desk, staring at his homework, but unable to focus. The threats and taunts played on a loop in his mind, each one a reminder of the line he had dared to cross by simply being excellent. He thought of his mother's words, her unwavering belief in him, and it gave him a flicker of strength. He couldn't let them win, not now, not ever. As he closed his notebook, he made a silent vow. He would stand his ground, no matter what Carter and his friends threw at him. They might try to break him, but Jeremiah had faced worse before. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong, and he wasn't about to back down. The bell rang sharply, signaling the end of the school day. Students flooded the hallways, their voices blending into an indistinct hum. Jeremiah moved quickly, keeping his head low and his backpack securely over one shoulder. The weight of the notes from his locker and the taunts that had followed him all day pressed heavily on his mind. He wasn't sure how much longer he could take this, but something inside him refused to break. He would endure. He had to. As he reached the school's front steps, he heard a voice behind him. "Jeremiah, wait!" Turning, he saw Mia jogging to catch up. Her long, blonde hair swaying as she moved. She was one of the few people who didn't treat him like an outsider. Still, he couldn't help but wonder why she was so insistent on helping him. "Hey," she said, slightly out of breath. "I saw what happened in class today. Are you okay?" Jeremiah hesitated. It wasn't often someone asked him that with genuine concern. "I'm fine," he replied curtly, though his voice betrayed the weight he carried. He started to walk away, but Mia wasn't ready to let him go. "You don't have to deal with this alone," she said, stepping in front of him. "I know Carter and his friends are awful, but they can't keep getting away with this." Jeremiah's expression hardened. "You don't understand. People like Carter always get away with it. He's untouchable." The bitterness in his voice surprised even him. He hated admitting it, but it was the truth he'd seen play out time and time again. Mia folded her arms, her green eyes narrowing. "That's only true if you let it be true. He's just a bully, Jeremiah, and bullies can be stopped." Jeremiah sighed, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "Why do you care, Mia? Why are you even talking to me?" Mia tilted her head, her gaze, her softening. "Because what they're doing to you is wrong, and someone needs to stand up for what's right. If you won't let me help, fine, but don't think I'm just going to sit back and watch." Her sincerity caught him off guard. For so long, Jeremiah had felt like the world was against him. Yet here was someone willing to stand by his side, even when it wasn't her fight. He didn't know whether to be grateful or suspicious, but for now, he chose to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Thanks," he said finally, his voice quieter. "But you should be careful. Carter doesn't like it when people stand up to him." Mia smirked, her confidence almost contagious. "Let him try. I'm not afraid of him." That night, as Jeremiah sat at his desk trying to finish his homework, Mia's words echoed in his mind. Bullies can be stopped. Could it really be that simple? He wanted to believe her, but experience told him otherwise. People like Carter didn't stop because someone told them to. They stopped when they were forced to. The question was, how? The next morning, Jeremiah arrived at school with a renewed sense of determination. He didn't know what Mia had planned, but her unwavering support had lit a small spark of hope inside him. He wasn't alone, not completely. As he approached his locker, he noticed Mia standing nearby, waiting for him. "Good morning," she said brightly, as if this were just another normal day. Jeremiah glanced at her warily. "What are you doing here?" "Making sure you don't start the day with another pile of hate mail," she replied matter-of-factly. She stepped aside, motioning for him to open the locker. "Go ahead." Jeremiah sighed but complied, expecting another barrage of cruel notes. To his surprise, the locker was empty. Not a single scrap of paper was out of place. He turned to Mia, his brow furrowed. "Did you—" "Let's just say I had a little chat with the janitor," she said, her tone light but her meaning clear. "He promised to keep an eye on things." Jeremiah didn't know whether to laugh or shake his head. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Mia's smile faded, and she looked at him earnestly. "Jeremiah, you're one of the smartest people in this school. You deserve to be here just as much as anyone else. More, actually. Carter and his friends are just scared because you're everything they wish they could be. Don't let them win." Jeremiah felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't used to hearing words like that, especially not from someone like Mia. "Thanks," he said softly. It was all he could manage, but he hoped she understood how much it meant to him. Throughout the day, Mia's presence seemed to make a difference, though Carter and his friends still shot glares in Jeremiah's direction. They didn't approach him or say anything outright. For the first time in weeks, Jeremiah felt like he could breathe. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start. After school, as they walked home together, Mia turned to him with a determined look. "We're going to figure this out, Jeremiah. We'll make them stop." Jeremiah glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe she might be right. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park where Jeremiah walked, his backpack slung over one shoulder. It had been a quiet afternoon, almost too quiet. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like an invisible weight pressing down on him. As he reached the park's entrance, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he read the message on the screen. "If you want your notebook back, meet us at the clearing. Come alone." Jeremiah's heart sank. He hadn't even realized his notebook was missing, but now it all made sense. Carter and his friends were behind this again. For a brief moment, he considered ignoring the message, but the thought of losing his notebook, filled with weeks of notes and assignments, left him no choice. He let out a shaky breath and tightened his grip on the backpack strap. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself. "Just get the notebook and leave." The clearing wasn't far from the main path, hidden by a cluster of tall oak trees. As Jeremiah stepped into the open space, he immediately regretted his decision. Carter stood at the center, flanked by his usual group of cronies, their smirks oozing with malice. One of them held Jeremiah's notebook, waving it tauntingly in the air. "Well, look who showed up," Carter said, his voice dripping with mockery. "The class genius. Did you miss us, Jeremiah?" Jeremiah didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the notebook, his mind racing for a way to retrieve it without escalating the situation. "Just give it back," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I don't want any trouble." Carter laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the clearing. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? We just wanted to talk." He stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over Jeremiah. "You think you're better than us, don't you? Always showing off in class, winning awards. It's pathetic." Jeremiah's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'm not trying to show off. I'm just doing my best." "Your best?" Carter sneered. "Your best is an insult to the rest of us. Maybe it's time someone taught you your place." Before Jeremiah could react, two of Carter's friends grabbed him by the arms, dragging him toward a shallow hole in the ground at the edge of the clearing. Jeremiah's heart pounded as he realized what they were planning. "Let me go," he shouted, struggling against their grip. Carter crouched by the hole, smirking as he picked up a handful of dirt. "Relax, genius. It's just a little game. You like being the center of attention, don't you? Well, now you'll have the whole park watching." Jeremiah's panic rose as they forced him to. His knees by the hole. He could feel the cold earth beneath his palms, the weight of their hands pressing down on his shoulders. His mind raced, searching for an escape. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something, a flash of movement among the trees. "Hey!" a voice shouted, sharp and commanding. The group froze, turning toward the sound. It was Mia, her face flushed with anger as she stormed into the clearing. "What do you think you're doing?" Carter stood, his smirk faltering for a moment before he regained his composure. "This doesn't concern you, Mia. Walk away." Mia crossed, her arms, her voice unwavering. "Like hell it doesn't. Let him go now." For a moment the clearing was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Carter laughed, though the sound was less confident than before. "And what are you going to do about it?" Mia didn't back down. She pulled out her phone, holding it up for everyone to see. "I'm recording everything. If you don't let him go, this video goes straight to the principal and the police." Jeremiah felt the hands on his shoulders loosen, then disappear altogether. He scrambled to his feet, his legs trembling as he stepped away from the hole. Carter glared at Mia, his jaw clenched. "You'll regret this," he muttered before turning to his friends. "Let's go." One by one, they followed him out of the clearing, their bravado fading with each step. Mia waited until they were out of sight before rushing to Jeremiah's side. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft now. Jeremiah nodded, though his hands still shook. "I think so. Thank you, Mia. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up." Mia smiled faintly, her eyes full of concern. "You don't have to thank me. They're the ones who should be sorry. What they did was disgusting." Jeremiah looked down at the notebook in his hands, his grip tightening. "They won't stop, you know. As long as I'm here, they'll keep coming after me." Mia placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch reassuring. "Then we'll make them stop, together." As they walked back toward the main path, Jeremiah felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He wasn't sure how they would face the challenges ahead, but for the first time, he didn't feel completely alone. And that, he realized, made all the difference. The walk back from the clearing was quiet, the tension of the earlier encounter still clinging to the air. Jeremiah clutched his notebook tightly, as if it were the last remaining piece of his dignity. Mia walked beside him, her expression a mixture of determination and concern. For the first time, Jeremiah allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of reality. Carter wouldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. That evening, Jeremiah sat at the kitchen table, the dim light of the overhead bulb casting shadows across his face. His mother, Evelyn, stood at the stove, stirring a pot of stew. She glanced over at him, noticing the tension in his shoulders and the faraway look in his eyes. "Jeremiah," she said gently, "what's wrong?" Jeremiah hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of his notebook. He didn't want to worry her, didn't want to add to the burdens she already carried, but the memory of Carter's taunts and the humiliation he had endured was too much to bear. Slowly, he began to tell her everything, the threats, the bullying, the incident at the park. His voice trembled as he spoke, the words tumbling out in a rush of emotion. Evelyn listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she set the spoon down and turned to face him, her hands resting on the counter. "Jeremiah," she said firmly, "you have every right to be angry, but you also have the right to stand up for yourself. You don't have to fight this battle alone." Jeremiah looked up at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what can I do? They're stronger than me, and it feels like no one cares." Evelyn stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Jeremiah. And you're not alone. There are people who care. Mia cares. I care. And if the school won't listen, we'll make them listen. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every kid who's ever been told they don't belong." Her words stirred something inside him, a spark of determination that had been buried beneath fear and doubt. "Jeremiah, nodded slowly, a flicker of resolve lighting his gaze. "You're right, I can't let them win." The next morning, Jeremiah and Mia sat in the school counselor's office, recounting the events of the previous day. The counselor listened attentively, her brow furrowed with concern. When they finished, she promised to take the matter to the principal, assuring them that the school would take appropriate action. But as Jeremiah and Mia left the office, they couldn't shake the feeling that the promise was empty. That afternoon, the principal called Jeremiah into his office. The room was stark and intimidating, with its dark wood furniture and walls lined with certificates and awards. Principal Carter, no relation to the bully, folded his hands on the desk and sighed. "Jeremiah, I understand this has been a difficult situation for you, but we need to be careful about making accusations. These kinds of allegations can damage the school's reputation." Jeremiah's heart sank. "But it's the truth," he said, his voice steady despite the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "They tried to hurt me. They need to be held accountable." The principal shook his head. "We'll look into it, but you need to understand that these things take time. I suggest you focus on your studies and let us handle this." As Jeremiah left the office, he felt a surge of anger and helplessness. The school wasn't going to help him. If he wanted justice, he would have to find another way. That evening, Jeremiah and Mia sat on the steps of her front porch, the warm glow of the setting sun painting the horizon in shades of orange and pink. "We can't let them sweep this under the rug," Mia said, her voice filled with determination. "If the school won't do anything, we'll take it to the next level." Jeremiah looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Mia pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts. "We go public. Social media, the local news, whatever it takes to get people to listen. We tell your story, and we make sure everyone knows what's happening." Here, Jeremiah hesitated, the idea both terrifying and empowering. "But what if it makes things worse?" Mia placed a hand on his arm, her gaze steady. "It might, but it might also make things better. Sometimes you have to take a risk to make a difference." Jeremiah nodded, a sense of purpose beginning to take root. "Okay," he said, "let's do it." Over the next few days, Jeremiah and Mia worked together to craft a post for social media, detailing the bullying and the school's lack of action. They included photos of Jeremiah's injuries and a video of Mia confronting Carter at the park. When they finally hit post, the response was immediate. Within hours, the story had been shared hundreds of times, drawing attention from students, parents, and even local reporters. As the story gained traction, Jeremiah began to feel a shift in the air. People who had once ignored him now offered words of support and encouragement. The school was forced to address the issue publicly, promising to implement anti-bullying programs and take disciplinary action against Carter and his friends. For the first time, Jeremiah felt a sense of hope. The battle was far from over, but he was no longer fighting it alone. With Mia by his side and the support of his community growing stronger each day, he knew he had the strength to face whatever came next. The days following the social media post were a whirlwind of activity. The story of Jeremiah's courage and the injustice he had faced spread rapidly, reaching far beyond the confines of his small town. News outlets picked up the story, and reporters began arriving at the school and Jeremiah's neighborhood, eager to speak with the boy who had refused to stay silent. At first, the attention overwhelmed Jeremiah. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the sudden influx of support felt almost surreal. Strangers reached out with messages of encouragement. Parents shared stories of their own children facing similar struggles, and local organizations expressed their admiration for his bravery. But with the support came criticism. Some accused Jeremiah of exaggerating the events, claiming that he was seeking attention or trying to damage the school's reputation. Jeremiah tried to focus on the positive, but the negativity weighed on him. "Why do people think I would lie about something like this?" he asked Mia one afternoon as they sat in the school library. "All I want is for them to understand what I've been through." Mia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. People are scared of change, Jeremiah. It's easier for them to doubt you than to confront the reality of what's happening, but you've already made a difference. Look at all the people who believe in you. Her words gave Jeremiah some comfort, but he still felt the burden of being the face of a movement he hadn't asked to lead. Despite his doubts, he continued to push forward, determined to turn his pain into a catalyst for change. The school's administration, feeling the pressure of public scrutiny, organized a town hall meeting to address the community's concerns. The auditorium was packed, with students, parents, teachers, and local residents all eager to voice their opinions. Jeremiah sat in the front row, with Evelyn and Mia by his side, his heart pounding as he prepared to speak. When his turn came, Jeremiah stood and walked to the podium. The room fell silent as he faced the crowd, his hands trembling slightly. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "My name is Jeremiah Williams, and I'm here because I believe we can do better. I've faced bullying and discrimination because of who I am, and I know I'm not the only one. No one should have to feel afraid to go to school or be punished for working hard and trying to succeed. We're all part of this community, and it's up to us to make it a place where everyone feels safe and valued." As he spoke, Jeremiah's voice grew stronger, his words resonating with the audience. He shared his experiences with honesty and vulnerability, and by the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time, Jeremiah felt a sense of validation. The town hall meeting marked a turning point. The school implemented a comprehensive anti-bullying program, and teachers received training on recognizing and addressing discriminatory behavior. Carter and his friends were suspended, and the administration announced plans to establish a diversity and inclusion committee to ensure that all students felt represented and respected. Jeremiah's bravery inspired others to come forward with their own stories. Students who had been silent about their struggles found the courage to speak up, and the school began to change in ways Jeremiah hadn't thought possible. He realized that his fight wasn't just about him, it was about creating a better future for everyone. One evening, as Jeremiah and Evelyn sat on the porch, she turned to him with a smile. "You've done something incredible, Jeremiah. You've turned your pain into something powerful. I'm so proud of you." Jeremiah looked out at the stars, a sense of peace washing over him. "I couldn't have done it without you and Mia," he said, "but I'm not done yet. There's still so much more to do." Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "And I'll be right here with you every step of the way." As the night grew quiet, Jeremiah felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced his fears, stood up for what was right, and inspired change in his community. And while the journey wasn't over, he knew he was ready to take the next step. Jeremiah woke up the next day feeling a weight he hadn't noticed before, an absence of fear. For so long, he had carried the burden of staying invisible, but now the world knew his name. It was both empowering and terrifying, but he knew he could no longer step back into the shadows. The school corridors, once filled with whispers and judgmental stares, had taken on a different tone. Some students smiled at him, offering words of encouragement, while others still avoided eye contact. Jeremiah focused on those who supported him, letting their kindness remind him that change, no matter how small, was possible. Mia was waiting for him at their usual spot by the lockers, a bright smile lighting up her face. "Good morning, Mr. Activist," she teased. "How does it feel to be the most talked-about person in school?" Jeremiah chuckled, shaking his head. "I wouldn't call it that, but it's nice to know I don't have to keep quiet anymore." Mia's expression softened. "You did something incredible, Jeremiah. You showed everyone that standing up for yourself isn't just about courage, it's about showing others they can do the same." Their conversation was interrupted by a teacher who approached Jeremiah. "Good morning, Jeremiah," she said with a warm smile. "The principal asked me to tell you that the new diversity committee is holding its first meeting this afternoon, and they'd like you to attend." Jeremiah hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was ready for another responsibility. But then he nodded. "I'll be there." The committee meeting was held in the library, and to Jeremiah's surprise, the room was filled with students, teachers, and even parents. The principal began by acknowledging the school's failures and promising to do better. "Today marks the start of a new chapter for our school," she said, "and we're here to listen, to learn, and to create lasting change." Jeremiah sat quietly as others shared their ideas and experiences. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up and looked around the room. "I'm here because I believe we can do better. Not just for me, but for everyone. Change won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy, but if we're willing to listen to each other and work together, we can make this school a place where everyone feels safe and valued." His words were met with applause, and for the first time, Jeremiah felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. As the meeting ended, several students approached him to thank him for his courage. One of them, a shy boy named Alex, whispered, "I've been through something similar. Thank you for speaking up." Jeremiah smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Alex's shoulder. "You're not alone, and if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." That evening, Jeremiah sat with Evelyn in their small living room, going over the day's events. "You've come so far, Jeremiah," she said, her voice filled with pride. "And I know this is just the beginning." Jeremiah nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I never thought I'd be in this position, but if I can help even one person feel like they belong, then it's all worth it." As the days turned into weeks, Jeremiah continued to navigate his new role as both a student and an advocate for change. He balanced his schoolwork with his involvement in the committee, and although the journey was challenging, he felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. One afternoon, Mia approached him with a flyer in hand. "There's a student leadership conference coming up," she said excitedly. "I think you should go. You'd be an amazing speaker." Jeremiah hesitated, unsure if he was ready to share his story on such a large platform, but as he looked at the flyer, he felt a spark of determination. "Maybe I will," he said, his voice steady. "It's time to show the world what we're capable of." And so, Jeremiah's journey continued, a journey of resilience, courage, and the unwavering belief that even the smallest voices can make the biggest difference. The day of the Student Leadership Conference arrived, and Jeremiah stood backstage, gripping the edges of his note cards. The auditorium was massive, its seats filled with students, educators, and community leaders from across the city. The hum of anticipation in the air was palpable, and Jeremiah felt the weight of his responsibility settle heavily on his chest. Mia appeared at his side, her encouraging smile a beacon in the whirlwind of his thoughts. "You've got this," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. "Just speak from your heart. That's what people want to hear." Jeremiah took a deep breath, nodding as the announcer's voice echoed through the room. "Please welcome our next speaker, a young man whose courage and determination have inspired us all, Jeremiah Reed." As the audience applauded, Jeremiah stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding. He scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar face, and found his mother sitting in the front row, her eyes glistening with pride. That sight alone gave him the strength to begin. "Good morning," Jeremiah started, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I stand before you today not as someone extraordinary, but as someone who chose to fight back against injustice." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "For as long as I can remember, I've been told that I don't belong. I've been told that my voice doesn't matter, that my achievements are a threat, and that my presence is unwelcome. But I'm here to tell you that those lies don't define us." The room was silent as Jeremiah shared his story, the bullying, the threats, the moment he almost gave up. He spoke about the support of his mother and Mia, and how their belief in him had reignited his strength. He spoke about the turning point, when he decided to stand up, not just for himself, but for everyone who felt invisible and unheard. As I stood in the face of hatred, Jeremiah said, his voice gaining strength, I realized that silence would only allow it to grow. So I spoke out, even when it was hard, even when I was scared, because I knew that change starts with one voice. He looked out at the audience, his gaze steady. But change doesn't end with one voice. It takes all of us, standing together, lifting each other up, and refusing to let fear or prejudice dictate our lives. The audience erupted into applause, and Jeremiah felt a wave of emotion crash over him. As he stepped off the stage, Mia was there to greet him, her smile brighter than ever. "You were incredible," she said, pulling him into a hug. Jeremiah's mother joined them, tears streaming down her face. "You've made me so proud, Jeremiah," she whispered, "and I know your story will inspire so many." In the weeks that followed, Jeremiah's speech gained traction online, sparking conversations about equality and resilience. His story became a symbol of hope for students facing their own battles, and schools across the city began implementing programs to address bullying and discrimination. But for Jeremiah, the true victory was in the small moments: the student who thanked him for giving them courage, the teacher who vowed to do better, the community that rallied around him and showed him that he was not alone. One evening, as Jeremiah sat with his mother on their porch, he reflected on how far he had come. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" he asked softly, his voice tinged with vulnerability. Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze filled with love. "Your father would be beyond proud," she said. "You've taken everything. He taught you about standing tall and turned it into something extraordinary." Jeremiah smiled, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. He knew that his journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. And as the stars lit up the night sky, Jeremiah made a silent promise to himself to continue breaking the chains of prejudice and fear, one step at a time. The days following Jeremiah's speech were a whirlwind. The video of his address had gone viral, spreading across social media platforms and sparking widespread conversations. News outlets picked up his story, dubbing him the boy who refused to be silenced. Messages of support poured in from people all over the country, students, parents, teachers, and even strangers who were moved by his courage. At school, the atmosphere had shifted. Students who once ignored him now greeted him with smiles. Teachers started to actively engage in discussions about creating a safer and more inclusive environment. The school administration, under mounting public pressure, finally began implementing anti-bullying workshops and diversity training. It was far from perfect, but it was a start. Jeremiah found himself at the center of it all, a reluctant but determined leader. He met with the principal to suggest student-led initiatives, worked with teachers to design peer mentorship programs, and even collaborated with Mia to form a club called Voices United, where students could share their experiences and ideas for change. Despite the positive momentum, Jeremiah knew that not everyone supported him. Carter and his friends had been suspended for their actions, but their absence didn't erase the underlying prejudices that lingered in some corners of the school. Jeremiah faced subtle remarks, side glances, and whispers behind his back. But he stood firm, refusing to let fear dictate his actions. One afternoon, while Jeremiah was organizing materials for the next Voices United meeting, he noticed Charles, one of Carter's closest friends, lingering near the doorway. Charles looked uneasy, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Hey, Charles," Jeremiah said cautiously. "Need something?" Charles hesitated before stepping inside. I wanted to talk to you," he said, his voice low, "about everything that happened." Jeremiah put down his papers, giving Charles his full attention. "I'm listening." I want to apologize," Charles stammered. "I was wrong. We were wrong. I went along with Carter because I didn't want to be the odd one out. But watching you stand up for yourself, even when everyone was against you, It made me realize how cowardly I've been. Jeremiah studied Charles's face, searching for any signs of insincerity. He saw none. It takes courage to admit. When you're wrong, he said finally. But words mean nothing without actions. If you're serious about making amends, show it. Charles nodded, a look of determination crossing his face. I will, he promised. Thank you for giving me a chance. That conversation marked a turning point. Over the next few weeks, Charles became an active member of Voices United, sharing his own journey and encouraging others to confront their biases. His involvement sent a powerful message. Change was possible, even for those who had once been part of the problem. Meanwhile, Jeremiah's story continued to inspire. Beyond the school walls, a local university invited him to speak at an event on social justice, and community leaders sought his input on initiatives to address inequality. Jeremiah found himself navigating a new world of opportunities, balancing his advocacy work with his studies. One evening, after a particularly long day, Jeremiah returned home to find his mother waiting for him on the porch. She held a letter in her hands, her eyes shining with pride. It came today, she said, handing him the envelope. Jeremiah's heart raced as he opened it. The letterhead bore the name of a prestigious scholarship foundation. He skimmed the words, his breath catching when he reached the sentence. We are pleased to award you a full scholarship in recognition of your exceptional resilience and leadership. Tears filled Jeremiah's eyes as he looked up at his mother. We did it, he whispered. Evelyn pulled him into a tight embrace. You did it, she said. You've shown the world what it means to rise above. As Jeremiah sat on the porch that night, gazing at the stars, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. His journey had been fraught with pain and challenges, but it had also been filled with moments of growth, connection, and triumph. He knew that his story wasn't just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt voiceless, invisible, or powerless. And as the night stretched on, Jeremiah made a vow to himself to continue being a voice for change, a beacon of hope, and a reminder that even the smallest ripple could create waves of transformation. Jeremiah stood on the stage of the school's vast auditorium, the spotlight warming his face as he clutched the microphone with trembling hands. He took a steadying breath, gazing out at the sea of faces before him. The once daunting walls of the auditorium no longer felt oppressive. Instead, they seemed to amplify his voice, as though urging him to speak his truth. The room was packed. Students, teachers, and members of the community filled every seat, their attention fixed solely on him. His heart pounded, but it was no longer from fear. It was from the weight of the moment, the culmination of months of pain, resilience, and quiet victories. Not long ago, Jeremiah began, his voice resonant but edged with emotion. I thought I didn't belong here. I thought my skin color, my intelligence, even my very presence was an inconvenience to some of you. I thought I didn't have a place in this school or in this world. The auditorium was silent, the weight of his words settling over the audience like a heavy blanket. Even Carter, seated in the back row, was uncharacteristically still, his usual smirk replaced with an expression of discomfort. I thought about giving up, Jeremiah continued, his voice steadying as he gained momentum. But here I am, not just for myself, but for every student who has ever felt the way I did, for anyone who has been told they're not enough because of how they look or where they come from. The crowd remained silent, but the air was charged with an indescribable energy. Jeremiah's mother, Evelyn, sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly together as if in prayer. Her face was a portrait of pride, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. As Jeremiah spoke, flashes of the past months filled his mind. He saw Carter and his friends jeering at him in the hallways, the cruel notes left on his desk, and the pit where they had tried to bury him. But those memories were now joined by others, faces of support, hands that had lifted him, voices that had defended him when he thought no one would. Excellence doesn't have a color, Jeremiah declared, his voice ringing with conviction. It doesn't have a social class, and no one should ever be punished for daring to shine. Applause broke out, hesitant at first but growing louder with each passing second. Jeremiah raised his hand, signaling for quiet, and the room quickly complied. His eyes scanned the crowd, finally landing on Carter. For a moment their gazes locked, and Jeremiah saw something in his tormentor's eyes. Shame, perhaps, or the beginnings of understanding. "I've chosen to forgive," Jeremiah said, his voice softening but no less powerful. "Not because what you did was right, not because I've forgotten, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your hatred. Forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me. It's how I'll grow stronger. It's how I'll move forward." Carter looked away, his face flushed with embarrassment. Beside him, Mia sat with a small, proud smile, her eyes glistening as she watched Jeremiah. When Jeremiah finished speaking, the crowd erupted into a standing ovation. The sound was deafening, but Jeremiah didn't flinch. He stood tall, his shoulders back, accepting the applause with quiet dignity. The school principal stepped onto the stage, taking the microphone. "Jeremiah," he began, his voice tinged with emotion, "your courage, resilience, and determination have inspired us all. It is my honor to announce that you have been awarded a full scholarship to one of the nation's most prestigious universities." The audience's applause swelled once more, but Jeremiah barely heard it. The scholarship was a gift, yes, but the true victory was the respect he had earned, the message he had delivered, and the lives he had touched. As the event concluded, students and parents approached Jeremiah, some offering handshakes, others heartfelt words of gratitude. A retired teacher, her hands trembling with age, held Jeremiah's hand tightly. "You've done something extraordinary," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "You've not only changed the minds of others, you've changed your own. That is the hardest battle of all." Later, as Jeremiah stepped outside, the evening sun bathed the school in golden light. He paused on the steps, looking up at the sky. A gentle breeze brushed his face, and for a fleeting moment he felt the presence of his father, a quiet strength, a guiding hand, a reassurance that he was on the right path. Evelyn joined him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. Jeremiah turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. "We did it," he replied. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who helped me get here." As they walked home together, Jeremiah felt lighter than he had in months. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more battles to fight. But now he carried something far more powerful than fear or anger. He carried hope, and that, he realized, was enough to carry him through anything. What lesson did this incredible story bring to you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your opinion in the comments, let us know where you're watching from, and become part of our community. Here at Living Narratives, every story is crafted with care and dedication, designed to inspire and move you. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss a new narrative, and give this video a like. Your support is what keeps us motivated to bring you more heartfelt stories. Stories like this take time and effort to create, and knowing they resonate with you makes it all worthwhile. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the next one.